If you're attending a networking event, that's a prospecting activity, right? You're looking for new business. You're out trying to build relationships and drum up business activity and sales activity for your product or your service. If you're at a networking event, I really encourage you to go in with a plan. Who do you want to meet that you don't know? Don't assume anything about anyone. Use the tools that we talk about on this show to really express interest and understand what that person does, how they live their life, and where the connection points are. Because if you go into a networking activity with a goal and a plan of what you need to get out of it, you're going to get so much more value as opposed to just hanging out at the bar and talking to your coworkers who you already know. Hello, and welcome to Prospecting on Purpose. My name is Sara Murray. I'm recording on a Friday, and I am coming down from a huge adrenaline high because I just wrapped up the second out of 2 virtual events, the first time I've executed anything like that, and everything was so much fun. Everything went so great. I feel so lucky and so blessed to have gotten through it. To be honest, I'm happy it's done. But at the same time, I am just filled with so much joy because I was able to really connect with a lot of listeners from this podcast in a way that I hadn't before. I was able to meet new people. I was able to gain new connections and contacts. So it just been so great, and I feel so happy and blessed and excited to share with you some of the outcomes from that session. So for this episode, I wanted to get a little bit of behind the scenes on what went into planning it, not from necessarily a logistics side, but more how did these events work towards my overall business goals? Because I think we need to really spend time and look at what areas are we spending our time, right? Because there's only so much time in a day, and time literally equals money. If you're spending your time with a certain customer who's not getting you to your sales goal, it's taking away time that you could be spending. So we need to be very intentional and thoughtful with our time. So I wanted to share a little bit about why I wanted to host these events, what the outcomes were, what my own personal takeaways and learnings were from it, and then what some of the audience feedback said, because I think that was really a big motivator for me, was to have the ability to get some feedback. I got great feedback. So if you attended either session, we had Prospecting on Purpose Live. That was on July 14th. It was a Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. It was a 1-hour workshop all around confidence, mindset, really understanding your core values, your core passions, your core competencies. What do you bring to the table in any type of interaction that really sets you on the same level or the same pedestal as your clients or other people that you have to work with and interact with? And of course, this is not just in a business setting, it can be in a personal setting as well. But for both of these events, we did have a very specific work lens on it. But that particular session, it was a webinar format. We had a really great participation in the chat. We went through some of the mindset stuff from an individual perspective, and then how to get into the steps of relationship building and what different tools can we use to really harness those relationships. And so that event was called Prospecting on Purpose Live. That essentially got us to where we land the meeting. Once we get the meeting, how do we then take it through the sales cycle? And so I had a second session that was over the course of 3 days. It was called Ace Your Sales, and it essentially breaks down the sales cycle into a very simple framework. So ACE is an acronym. It stands for action, communication, and execution. And we spent a day on each of those topics with some pretty tactical methods. So it was pretty hands-on on the how to do it. And a lot of it is stuff that people know, but I think what I'm really learning, and I'm getting this lesson every day in my business efforts, is we need to practice these things, right? You can't just do one webinar and then you're done and you know how to do everything. Of course not. This is always a work in progress. So I just want to really appreciate the time that people spend in sitting down and doing this work, because it's only going to serve us as we continue in our own personal and professional development. So once again, truly from the bottom of my heart, thank you for that. Thank you for joining. When we got into Ace Your Sales, I will share with you, prospecting on purpose sort of has a lot of different meanings. One of the meanings when I think about prospecting on purpose, and I know I've shared this example on the show before in past episodes, but really, this means selling with intention and going into any type of business activity with an idea on what the outcome is going to be from that activity. So I give examples of a networking event, for example. If you're attending a networking event, that's a prospecting activity, right? You're looking for new business. You're out trying to build relationships and drum up business activity and sales activity for your product or your service. If you're at a networking event, I really encourage you to go in with a plan. Who do you want to meet that you don't know? Don't assume anything about anyone. Use the tools that we talk about on this show to really express interest and understand what that person does, how they live their life, and where the connection points are. Because if you go into a networking activity with a goal and a plan of what you need to get out of it, you're going to get so much more value as opposed to just hanging out at the bar and talking to your coworkers who you already know, right? How are you spending your time? How are you spending your money or your company's money in business activities? And if you go in with a plan, you're more likely to actually get the outcome from that specific event. Same goes with a sales meeting, right? You go into a sales call, you have a plan of what you need to get to the next stage in the sales cycle. So it's not only from an individual activity, but an overarching goal activity. So there's two layers there. The first day of Ace Your Sales, I'll give you a little sneak peek into the content that we discussed. Action was the first day, and taking action is the most important piece in our prospecting efforts, right? Just like dating, if we're not gonna, our husband or wife or partner isn't gonna come knock on our door if we're sitting in our apartments or our homes. We have to go out and meet people, right? We have to go prospect. It's the same with our customers. We have to take action and take that step. So we also discussed action as it applies to your overall goal. So the example I used in the workshop is it was a sales goal because it was a sales workshop, and our hypothetical goal for the year was $1 million in sales. But one tool that I use in my business every day, I've used it in a sales role, I've been doing this for probably about 8 years consistently, is I identify what I call my big rocks. So one thing I like to share, and we discussed it in Ace Your Sales, so this is a little bit of behind the scenes here, but we talk about the concept of our overall goal. So in this example for this workshop, we had a sales goal of $1 million. That was our hypothetical annual sales quota for the year. But the way that we get to that goal is to really chunk down and identify what are the big rocks that are going to get us to our goal. And essentially, a big rock is anything that moves us closer to our overall goal. And that can be a customer, a project, a new prospect that we're chasing. Identifying these big rocks is going to help us see the vision to get to our full goal. So a quick example I'll share is if our goal is $1 million and we have a customer who gives us $250,000 in revenue a year, that is a big rock. We need to be spending time supporting that client, nurturing that client, making sure they're happy with us and our service, finding new opportunities within that account. How are we hunting and prospecting for new business within that big rock? So using these types of clients as objectives to get us to our bigger goal. But when we start to sit down and look at this stuff, we may have a client who gives us $30,000 a year. We still value their business, but they might be asking us questions all day, every day. We might take their people out to lunch all day, every day. Is that the best use of our time? If our whole goal is $1 million, and we're spending a lot of time on an account that does 30K, doesn't mean we don't service that account, but we may just need to look at and evaluate how we spend that time. So a big thing that we discussed is identifying big rocks to get us to our goals. And I give you that backstory because I want to use the Prospecting on Purpose live workshop as an example, big rock in my business, to show you how I break it down behind the scenes. So Prospecting on Purpose live was my free workshop on July 14th. I actually write it down. So the Ace Your Sales folks got this document, but you could write it on a piece of paper easily. I essentially overlay what is the objective. And I'm using the word objective very intentionally here. So our goal is X. The big rocks are these individual projects or objectives that we are working on to get us to our bigger goal. So in this example, my entire business isn't Prospecting on Purpose Live. This was just a project within my overall business goal. So I at the top, I identify what is the actual objective, like what's the event, who's the customer, what's the project, right? So in this example, Prospecting on Purpose Live was the objective. And then I give some specificity. So my objective for Prospecting on Purpose was to get 200 people to register. That was my goal. That was my North Star. That's what I wanted to get registered for the event. The next piece that I would encourage you to look at is I always sit and understand, why am I spending my time, my effort, and my money on this? What is the desired outcome? What is the why? And in this example, I had quite a few whys. And something that I've learned recently, and I've been practicing in my business, it's a very cool concept. I hope this helps you, is anything you do, if you can get 3 times the return on it, or if you can use it in 3 different ways, then it's worth doing. So if you're debating on where to spend your time, or if you want to take on extra workload or chase a project or start a new project, think to yourself, what are 3 other ways I can get value out of this activity, out of this big rock? That has really helped me. So when I sat down and I thought about why am I wanting to do this? Why do I want to do this? The first and most important thing to me is I really wanted to be able to interact with the podcast audience. A podcast has been really fun. I've been learning a lot, but it is very one way in a lot of ways. And I am someone who likes people. I like to hear from the listeners. And so this was an opportunity to really build out a platform and interact with the podcast audience. I also wanted to serve the audience because I had quite a few requests come in to do something like this. So it sounded fun. I thought, okay, let's do it. Let's put this into action. That was another motivator. Another piece that I am needing to do for my business is to start to build an email list. So hosting a free event gave me an opportunity to start an email list. I'm not sure yet what that list is going to do at this point, but I do have a lot of fun things cooking behind the scenes that I'm working on, and I don't have a way to communicate it to you outside of the podcast. So having the ability to start to gather email addresses as a form of outreach and communication is one of the other motivators. And that's part of why I chose to do the event. Another piece that I really wanted to prioritize is getting feedback and testimonials, because again, it is a one-way application in a lot of ways outside of the lovely reviews that people have left. So again, thank you so much for those who have left a review. But I was able to get really specific feedback, and I'll share what that feedback was. And that was invaluable to me. So those kind of 4 big things were my motivator to launch Prospecting on Purpose. And then of course, one of the biggest is that was the foundation laying for Ace Your Sales, which was a paid workshop. And I'm not sure yet how it fully fits into my business, but one thing that I've said on this show that I really, really take to heart is that business is fluid, and you have to be open to go with the flow and see where it takes you. And I had enough requests for this type of format that I thought, yeah, let's try it, right? It forces me to figure it out and deliver. So those were all of my whys, right? I think I had 4 or 5 that I just rattled off. The next piece, and this is so important in moving any big rock forward to your goal, is we have to have end dates. And for me personally, I am very much motivated by external accountability. And this has always been my way of operating. I can totally execute something, but I need something on the line. I need some skin in the game. I need to have other people having eyes on it, because otherwise I just won't do it, or it doesn't get me there as fast as I need to execute. So one of the things that has always helped me is I put a date on the calendar, and then I have to get it done by the date. And this is not just in business. This is in every sales role I've had. It's like, okay, hey, team, I want to host a hotel tour on this date. Let me lock it in with the venue and let's go. Hey, we want to do a showroom opening. Hey, we want to do a panel discussion. Hey, I want to do XYZ. Get it on the calendar and then work backwards from there. So that has been something that has really worked for me in terms of external accountability, is get it on the calendar, and then you have to do it because you put it out in the world. So I know that that's how I operate. So this is part of why I wanted to do it too. Obviously, then I have to reverse engineer it and work backwards from there. So the final step in our big rock planning, we went through specificity, we went through our desired outcome, the why we're doing it. We addressed the end date and really leveraged the heck out of that external accountability. The last piece is, what very specific actions are we going to take to get us to that goal? And so some examples I could share to execute Prospecting on Purpose Live. If you registered for the event, you'll notice there was a landing page that gave you more details and had a registration form. I found an awesome guy in India. His name's Pawan. I think Pawan listens to the show, so shout out to Pawan. Pawan built the two beautiful landing pages for both events. I knew I could probably figure it out, but that's not my zone of genius. That's not where I wanted to spend my time, because I could outsource and have Pawan help me, right? So that was one of my action steps. I knew I needed the landing pages. The second piece is all the back-end software and infrastructure. Oh my gosh, you guys, so much work. I can't even tell you. I am shocked how much time it took. And I outsourced support there as well. So from the landing page, you obviously have your website, then you have your CRM tool, then you have the Zoom registration, then you have a checkout page, and all of that stuff has to automate on the back end. Once again, not my zone of genius, not what I'm great at. So I had to outsource help. I met a woman named Veronica. She has a digital marketing agency. If you were on Prospecting on Purpose Live, Veronica was on the call with us. She was managing the chat. She was dropping in the links. She was picking prize winners. I needed a Veronica to help me execute Prospecting on Purpose Live, right? So two different pieces that I outsourced there. Then, of course, I had to build out the content. I had to promote the show. All of those specific things took action steps to get there. But once you chunk down, in your big goals, your big overarching goals for your business or your roles, if you can break them down into smaller digestible chunks and reverse engineer it in this way, everything gets done for the most part. And I will tell you that I've had 3 mantras that have really served me, not just in the business, but as I was employed as well, that I hope serve you. The first is, I always get everything done. Like, I have that on I'm literally looking at it now. I have it on a post-it note above my desk. I always get everything done. Even if, there should be a little asterisk there, even if it's not perfect, right? I think that's a really big thing that prevents people from taking action, is they either don't know how to do it, they don't know how to figure it out, or they're worried they're not going to have enough time to make it perfect, so they don't even try. Messy and perfect action is what's going to get you to your goals. Action brings your dreams closer. Action brings clarity. I didn't mean to go into all these other mantras, but those are 2 others that I really like. The last 2 that I'm going to leave you with that I really have resonated with me, I heard them on a podcast by a woman named Jen Casey. Her podcast is called The CEO Psyche. These 2 have really helped me when I'm tackling something new. The first is, I am already a master at making things happen. The second is, I give myself permission to be a beginner. And when I think about Prospecting on Purpose Live, Sure. I've never launched a webinar with my own content like this in this way, representing my business before, but I have presented a ton. I've built a bunch of presentation decks. I love presenting and holding space and being an energizing person for others. So all of that is stuff I've already done before. Now I just needed to spin it in a way where it was new. Figuring out all the back end software, that was new. It was a huge pain in the butt. If I'm being honest, I can't believe how not easy that stuff is, but it forced me to figure it out. And that's where that external accountability piece really comes into play, because now I've built the machine, I figured it out, I got feedback from the listeners that it was valuable and worth the effort. And now I can workshop this and change and pivot in different ways because I did all this work on the back end. That is a big rock that's moving me towards my goal. So I hope that that framework helps you when it comes to big rocks. From just a logistical standpoint, I usually pick about 3 big rocks, and I do it on 2-month cycles. So I'll identify what are the 3 biggest things I need to do in the next 2 months to move my business forward. That can be broken down by weekly, by monthly, quarterly, and so on. It just helps me. I print them out and I put them right next to my computer, and I look at them every day and I take the steps I need to do to move the big rocks forward. It really helps me, and I hope that that helps you. And then I want to share a couple of the feedback pieces and takeaways from the audience, because I was a little surprised at some of the feedback that I got, but in the best possible way. I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I was happy to hear is that I gave a lot of very specific examples in the podcast, in my workshops, in my presentations. I give a lot of very specific examples, but for the most part, they're all from my own experience. Up 16 plus years of corporate professional, and then of course, 10 years working at the local country club and schmoozing all the clients, snoozing all the members, right? Like, we learn this as pivot points throughout our whole lives, but I share a lot of specific examples, but they're from my own experience. And just to be very transparent with you, listeners, I was pretty anxious about it because I've actively tried to get more generic examples, and it just wasn't communicating the message in the way that I wanted to get the point across or the takeaway from. So I've been a little bit insecure about the fact that I've only been using really my own examples, because that's the only lens and experience I have is my own examples. But one of the things that was so cool to receive feedback on, and almost consistently everyone gave me this feedback, they loved the very specific examples, including the pain points, because I've shared areas where I've made some big mistakes before, and I share them because I would never want somebody else to make the same mistake. And so having that feedback and that two-way communication of saying the specific examples were incredibly helpful, that helps me. It removes a little layer of insecurity and fear that I had, so I can continue to share real life examples. And as I continue to build the business, I think there's a lot of value in learning along with me as I go, because I'm making mistakes left and right, but I'm also getting a lot of great wins, which has been the fuel to keep me going. So that was a really great piece of feedback. So thank you for everyone who shared that. The other piece that I think was consistently across the board the most important piece of feedback is this concept in sales. We've all heard it. ABC, always be closing. And when we look at sales from a relationship standpoint, the way that we build genuine, authentic relationships is we always have to be adding value to the other person. So I would like to, of course, ABC is important, always be closing is important, but I think a more impactful way to look at it is an acronym that I created called ABAV, always be adding value. That's how we need to look at any type of exchange. When we prospect on purpose, we always need to be thinking ABAV, how am I adding value to the other person. And if you start to do this work and really understand your own values, what you bring to the table, what you're good at, what your company is good at, it's a lot easier to be confident when you're going into these meetings because you're adding value to people. And it can be in all sorts of ways. My very first meeting when I started my company, I went to this lunch with someone who's very successful, very impactful. They've been a guest on the show. And I felt uncomfortable because I didn't have anything to add to her. But at the same time, I know how to practice these things. I knew she's working on a personal project. I saw a magazine article that reminded me of the personal project she mentioned. I cut the magazine article out and I put it in an envelope. And then when we were at lunch, I gave her the envelope, right? It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be something that, hey, I'm giving you this magazine article because one day I might ask you for a favor. That's not it. We always need to be thinking, how can we support the other person in their business, in their goals, in their life? Like, how are we always adding value? Because if you get to this place where you're always adding value to others, when it comes time to cash in the favors and ask for things, it's really easy to ask. I will tell you, I felt zero guilt or yuckiness asking for feedback because I had enough deposits in their bank accounts to ask for that feedback. And I feel like we get into this feedback loop, whereas if we're always adding value to each other, work becomes more fun. It becomes a lot more seamless to execute things together as partners, and we get to do it by being our authentic selves. And I think that's my third and final takeaway from this is our own superpowers are really what makes us special and what makes us likable and memorable. And that's why people want to work with us. The relationship is the most important piece. And if you can show up as your authentic self, it's going to shine through in your interactions. And the final example that I'll share is, I have years ago, as kind of COVID was rounding out and we were able to get together outside, I had, with my team, we did a Secret Santa. And I was at this store called Paper Source, and they had all of these little tiny hand, like finger puppets. And I bought one for me and one for my Secret Santa. And I thought we could do little virtual high fives on our Zoom calls, on our team calls. And I could not stop laughing at this little tiny hand. It was cracking me up. So on the way to the Christmas party, I stopped and I bought hands for the whole team. And we were in tears laughing at these tiny little hands. I will tell you that this show is now on YouTube. So I'm playing with a little tiny finger hand puppet right now if you want to go watch it on YouTube. But I love the tiny hands. I think they're hysterical. They make me laugh every time. And so for the workshop, I found ways to play with the tiny hands throughout the workshop, and it was super fun. Somebody won a set of tiny hands, and she ended up sending me a really great email. So to shout out to Holly there, but it was so fun to be able to play with the little hands as part of my business. And afterwards, so now the little hands have evolved and they have different shapes. There's one with a middle finger, there's one with a thumbs up, one making an okay symbol, and then one that kind of makes this like rock on, your center two fingers are down and you got the rock on symbol. So that's one of my tiny hands. And I had a follow-up meeting probably an hour after Prospecting on Purpose Live ended. So the really great guy, he has a really popular LinkedIn Live show, and I was introduced to him through one of my podcast guests. And so we had a meet and greet discovery call. And I hop on the call and he says, "Hi, Sarah, you just had a big event this morning, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. So you're kind of catching me on the come down. I got a lot of weird energy going." And he laughed. He said, "Yeah, I understand that." And then he says, "So how did the event go?" And deadpan, I threw up the little tiny hand emoji with the rock on symbol. And I said, "I'd say it rocked." like the weirdest little girl. And this guy died. He was laughing so hard. Like he was off camera. He lost his mind. It was so funny. We were both laughing so hard. And then we got into his audience and his show and what they're looking for. And we were talking about sales messaging and whatnot. And he says, "Well, I got to tell you, this was such a fun conversation. Our audience needs you. Well, let's lock it in. Please bring the tiny hands." And I gave him the okay symbol. I was like, "No problem." So it was just one of those things where it was a cool full circle moment for me personally, because I get to I get to build a business and a conversation where I get to play with my little tiny hand puppets, and it's fun. So I will link the tiny hand puppets in the show notes if anyone wants to play with them. I think they're really funny. I did this in corporate too. So again, embracing your authentic self in how you connect with others. People are here for it. It makes it way more fun to work and collaborate. I just, again, want to say thank you so much for those who attended. If you missed it and you want to be notified on future events, you can sign up for the email notifications at the website. It's called connect.saramurray.com. I'll link it in the show notes too. I'm not sure, I don't have anything planned coming up, but it was so much fun. I got so much joy out of it. The feedback and the testimonials were amazing. I'll add them to my website soon. But just again, a wholehearted thank you. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for attending the live events. Thanks for being along with me in this journey. I hope that it's providing value to you. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, am filled with joy and where we're at. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.